What is up, YouTube? Daniel here with another stock market video for you guys here on my channel, Life with Dan. You guys, have finally happened. The FAA has finally given Boeing permission to put their 737 MAX planes back out into circulation, back into the world. So this is something I've been waiting for. Obviously, you guys know the past couple of months, something I've been anticipating. And now that we finally have it here, now that the news is finally out and about, we're going to look into what the announcement really means for Boeing, what Boeing has to do now in order to actually get their planes out into the air now that they have permission to do so, and kind of what I see going forward for Boeing's stock and what I plan to do because of that. Because now that we have this announcement that we've been waiting for so long, it's definitely a time to reconsider, to take a look at our positions and think about what we're going to do. So it's going to be a pretty value-packed video, guys. I did a lot of research for this one, and it's going to be strictly Boeing. So if you guys like the video, I'd appreciate if you guys could hit the like and subscribe buttons. The like button to continue supporting the channel, and the subscribe button if you haven't already to follow along with the journey, to keep up with the videos I put out every week, and to help my channel grow. So let's not waste any more time, guys. Let's get into that video right after the intro. Alright guys, so to get right into it, as we see this New York Post headline here, it says Boeing 737 MAX gets FAA approval to return to skies. So the actual announcement was made early last Wednesday morning, and just to kind of take it back a little bit, to kind of recap what's happened, that marked the end of a 20-month suspension of the 737 MAX planes that are under Boeing's inventory. To remember, the reason why that happened was because there was two tragic airplane crashes that happened, one in late 2018, I believe it was October, and another early 2019, leading to the obviously justified suspension of these airplanes in March of 2019. I wanted to quickly show you guys Boeing's response to the announcement from the FAA. As we can see here, they put up their own announcement on their website. It says the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration today rescinded the order that halted commercial operations of Boeing 737-8S and 737-9S. The move will allow airlines that are under the FAA's jurisdiction, including those in the United States, to take the steps necessary to resume service and Boeing to begin making deliveries. So all that sounds very nice. It sounds like the FAA and Boeing are friends again and everyone's happy and the plane can be used, but we're not out of the woods yet. As we go back to the New York Post article that we were looking at, it says here, though the aircraft got the green light from the FAA, it will not be carrying passengers right away because the agency said it must approve 737 MAX pilot training program revisions for each U.S. airline that uses the plane. In addition, regulators in other countries want to recertify the aircraft. The FAA said in a statement that before any of the planes can be flown with passengers again, required changes to the plane must be installed and the agency must inspect the individual jets. And that process is expected to take between a few weeks and a few months. So although they have permission to use these planes again commercially, there's still a few things that have to happen before these planes are actually in the air. So that's what we're going to go into next. The way I saw it when I was looking into everything and doing my research for this video, I saw that there are four different entities that have chores to do, if you will, four different entities that have a list of things that have to happen in order to get the 737 MAX out into the air. So there's a lot of people working together on this. One, obviously, is Boeing. Boeing has a list of things that Boeing has to do in order to get the planes ready. The airlines have to do a lot of things in order to get those planes ready, both with the ones that they have and the ones that they expect to receive. The FAA has a list of things that it has to do while all this is going on, and other countries that are outside of the FAA's jurisdiction have a list of things that they have to do. So let's go into each of those one at a time. So, to go over the chores that Boeing has in order to get these planes into the air, we can actually go straight to their investor relations website in order to get that information. They've already prepared, as you guys can see here, all the information necessary for investors to check into who are curious about what their plans are with regards to getting the plane into the air. As we see here, with regards to returning to service, it says whether a plane was manufactured after the order was issued or is already in a customer's fleet, it has to go through a rigorous FAA-defined process before returning to service. And there are three things involved with that. As you guys can see here, preparing the airplanes, inspecting the airplanes, and supporting the airlines. So to keep it simple, those are the three tasks that Boeing has, but let's break into it a little bit more with preparing airplanes. As we can see, we can learn more here. It says here, what's required to take the airplane out of storage? When each airplane was stored, it went through a comprehensive multi-day process designed to preserve the airplane and its engines and systems while not in use. Now that the order has been lifted, the process has to be reversed before the airplane can be reactivated. What work is going to be performed on each airplane? Once the airplane is reactivated, all of the changes mandated by the FAA will be completed and thoroughly documented. This will include updates to MCAS, which is their additional software updates, and modifying some wiring to meet FAA requirements. To get into the details of the inspection, for those that are curious, it says the FAA defined the comprehensive processes that will be used to inspect and approve each and every airplane before it can return to commercial service. So they have to take every single plane individually and go through the whole process. I mean, that makes sense. Obviously, it's a big, huge aircraft. It's not like they can just slap them all on a conveyor belt and get them, recertified. So every single plane has a bunch of people working on it individually, and every single one has to go through its process. It says here, what will happen with the undelivered airplanes that are still with Boeing? Every airplane will go through Boeing's comprehensive protocol for delivery of a new airplane, even though they're not new. This includes flight critical ground testing, test flights by Boeing and the customer, and a detailed customer inspection, the customers being the airlines. The FAA will perform in-person individual reviews of each new airplane prior to issuing its airworthiness certificate. What will happen with the airplanes that were delivered to customers, so those that were already with the different airlines? Airplanes that are already part of a customer fleet have their own FAA processes and checkpoints. These include showing the FAA documentation of all the performed changes and completion of an operational readiness flight. And then finally, it goes into how Boeing is going to be supporting the airlines during this whole process. I'm not going to be reading that section in particular, but basically it goes into how it's going to be providing training on site for these airlines, how it's going to be with them through the whole process for the certification and for any questions. It's just basically by force having to be around for the entire thing for the airlines, having to answer any questions and providing any support that they might need. With regards to the airlines, like we mentioned, they're going to have to retrain their pilots, download all the necessary software, install all the necessary upgraded parts, and go through that whole process similar to what Boeing's doing, basically treat these planes like new and get their pilots adjusted to all whatever new softwares and new parts they have to work with. So as you guys can see, Boeing has a hefty list of things to do before these planes are actually out. Every single one has to be taken out of storage, those that were put away, and recertified as a new plane. Those that are with airlines have to be treated with new softwares, new installations, have to receive pilot training, and all of that has to be overseen and approved by the FAA. So that kind of gives you guys all three of those people's chores. The FAA is really just in charge of making sure all of this gets recertified and done correctly. As you can obviously expect, to have a lot more pressure on them now. We wouldn't want to see another plane crash. So I'm assuming that the FAA is going to be pretty firm in making sure that all of these things are getting done how it is that they asked for them to be done. And finally, the fourth contributor in this equation, the rest of the world. Even though the FAA has removed their suspension on the 737, that doesn't mean the rest of the world has. So wherever the FAA doesn't have jurisdiction, we still have to wait on those countries to decide that they want to allow the 737 MAX to operate in their areas. But as we look at this Reuters article titled European Regular to Lift Boeing 737 MAX Grounding in January, pretty much puts it straightforward. It looks like we are set to have most of the countries in Europe follow the United States and recertify the 737 for flying. As we read here in the article, it says the head of the European Union Aviation Safety Agency, or the EASA, said in remarks aired on Saturday that the 737 MAX was safe to fly after changes to the design of the jet that crashed twice in 5 months in 2018 and 2019, killing 346 people. It says here, we wanted to carry out a totally independent analysis of the safety of this aircraft, so we performed our own checks and flight tests. All these studies tell us that the 737 MAX can return to service. We have started to put in place all of the measures, he said. It is likely that in our case, we will adopt the decisions allowing it to return to service sometime in January. As we continue on here, it says that the EASA represents the 27 European Union countries plus 4 other nations, including Norway, which has 92 of the aircraft on order. So that's going to be a lot more countries to come on board with the 737 MAX by the end of January, so that's a very good sign for Boeing. But altogether, these are the 4 entities, if you will, that are working towards getting this plane back into the air. Boeing with its own individual chores of getting these planes out of storage and getting them ready to fly again, airlines retraining their pilots to make sure that they know what they're doing with these new planes and the new software, the FAA making sure that everything within their jurisdiction is being done correctly and safely, and the rest of the world deciding to follow along and recertify the 737 MAX within their jurisdictions. And what's really good for Boeing in this situation, now that they know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and so does everyone else, is that we're going to start to slowly see the orders coming in for these 737s now that airlines are themselves preparing for what everyone hopes will be a quick recovery in the travel industry. Throughout these different headlines, we can see that airlines like Southwest, Delta, and Alaska Airlines have all already been in talks with Boeing about picking up old planes, leasing new ones, and continuing orders that were previously set to be in motion but were put on hold because of COVID and because of the suspension. So it's a new day for Boeing, guys. It's only a matter of time before we see things completely flip where the 737 is actually being delivered and deployed out in numbers that we didn't see happen at all throughout 2020. But with all that said, you would have thought that the reaction from the stock would have been different from what we saw last week on Wednesday after the FAA made the announcement. As you can see here, right around the time that the market was open at 6:30, it was at a high of 223, which we hadn't seen in a while. But the rest of the day, it just spent declining, actually finished down from where it finished on the 17th. If we go over here to look at where November 17th finished, we had finished at $210 a share, and even though it went up a bunch, the 18th finished down at 203. And it has recovered since then. As we can see, on Tuesday it finished around $219 a share. But even then, it was not quite what I expected to see it go up and then all of a sudden lose all those gains and actually finish down on the day. So with that in mind, what can we as Boeing investors expect to see going forward for the stock price? Because like we've been talking about, we did not get that expected turnaround with the news that the 737 now has permission to fly again. So unfortunately, guys, I think what we can expect to see is pretty much a continuation of Boeing's stock trend the last couple of months, where it kind of just moves sideways, and with continued volatility, it'll have momentary moves down and momentary moves up. And the reason for that, guys, the reason why we're going to have that situation continue rather than have, a new day for the stock where it moves up and kind of holds new levels, is because of the fact that there's still too much to worry about with Boeing as a company. There's still a lot of concerns to be addressed, and like we've been looking at, a lot for the company to do to be able to get itself back into a position financially, operationally, where it was before COVID, and especially before having to ground the 737. As we look here at these documents from Boeing's recent earnings report, as we look at the statements of financial position, which is basically like a balance sheet, we can see that their long-term debt has reached levels that it has not seen in years. Long-term debt is sitting at $57 billion. And if we compare that to the end of last year, 2019, you can see that their long-term debt was at $19.9 billion, so way less, more than half of what their long-term debt was in prior years. So it's pretty crazy to think about, because when we look up here at their assets are lower than their current liabilities. So it's not a good position for Boeing to be in. As we look here at Boeing's statement of cash flows, the cash flow operations in comparison to last year is just terrible. They have a net loss of $3.5 billion, whereas they had a $374 million earning last year. And then when we skip down here to net cash by operating activities, the numbers are just terrible. Last year we had a loss of $226 million. This year we're looking at a net cash loss of $14.4 billion for Boeing. Comparing their sales, so the revenue that the company brought in to last year, for example, we see that their total revenues is just way less than what they were getting last year. So it's still a very bad time for Boeing, guys, I have to say. We might have seen the 737 get certification again, but for the 9 months ended September 30th this year, we're seeing a net loss of $3.5 billion like we looked at. Just not good numbers for Boeing's financial position. And that's why we're going to continue to see Boeing trade the way that it is. We might see momentary moves up and momentary moves down as new investors look at the stock and consider whether or not they should be in it. But for those of us that have been in it already, I think personally, we're not going to see lows past 180, I don't think, right? So it's been steadily above that since even before the announcement that the FAA was going to approve the 737. So I still think we're going to be above 190, but restricted to below 230. And I think what's really going to pass that, what's really going to cause the stock to move on to new levels, is when we finally start getting more orders of the planes and we start getting reports on them working down that debt. They have to work down that long-term debt for us to be able to consider Boeing a worthwhile investment, because right now, guys, they're operating at a net loss. They've got debt for the next, who knows how many years, and we need to know that there are signs of life and faster signs of recovery for their commercial side, hence the 737. So a lot to think about as Boeing investors, guys. How long is it going to take for them to work down that long-term debt? How long is it going to take for them to get the plane in the air and finally start bringing in revenue from the 737? And also some outside thing that people need to take into consideration is, are people going to feel safe on that plane going forward? Are people going to want to fly on the 737? Now, we know that Boeing and airlines are going to try to, rename the plane and rebrand it so that it's not associated with the MAX name. But nonetheless, people are going to know about the plane. People are going to be worried. So that's another thing that I, as an investor, have been thinking about. Are people going to get over the fear of the 737? It's something to take into consideration, because that could linger on the revenue for longer than we would expect, even with the 737 being revamped. And then finally, one last concern, just to put it out there, there have been recent talks of Airbus and Boeing considering electric airplanes. Now, I'm not going to go into this a lot for this video because we're focused on the 737 and what I see going forward for the stock. But if Boeing is to entertain an electric airplane, this is only going to add more long-term debt. This is going to be something that they have to invest more and more money into, pick up more and more debt for, because they don't have the cash for it right now. And if this is something that they take on, soon in the near future, let's say as a means of replacing the 737 or something like that, to try to get ahead of branding and move on from this whole thing, that is even more financial worry on Boeing as a company. It's exciting to think about for the future and the products that they could be offering in the future and what the future of the aviation industry is with electric planes. But for the time being, Boeing has to get out of this 737 pickle. So that is yet another thing to worry about. If it is true, I mean, it's just article headlines right now, right? Boeing hasn't come out and said anything, but if it is true, something to watch as the long-term debt piles up if they do begin to do so. So now that all that's been said, now that you have all that information, now that you have my prediction for what Boeing stock is going to be doing for the next little while, here's what I plan to do with my position of Boeing stock going forward. As of right now, I currently have just under $2,000 in Boeing stock, and the reason for that is because a couple weeks back I had pulled out 2 or 3 shares to free up some cash to put elsewhere. So now I'm sitting at just under 2K with 9.02 shares at an average cost of $161. I'm up about 35% on this stock as of Wednesday, November 25th. So, I really don't plan on getting rid of my position just yet. I kind of decided that I have this game plan for end of year. Well, not really end of year, for the end of their first quarter, which is due to report at some point in January. Now, right now, with up 34% of my position, what I kind of plan on doing is holding until I get to about 50% up. Now, for me to be up 50% of my position, Boeing would have to hit about $240 some per share for that to be so. So what I'm planning on doing is holding on to the stock, not really doing much, and I would only add if it were to go down below that range that I had mentioned. If it were to go down below 190, at that point I would consider putting more money into the stock. But I don't plan on letting go. As these orders come out and as these remaining countries lift their ban on the 737, I still think that those types of headlines are things that could push the stock a little bit higher as more and more people see that the risk is starting to go down, that the approval is starting to go up on Boeing as a company. So considering the fact that they're expected to report earnings on the 27th of January, as you guys can see there, my plan is to hold out until then, until after earnings, and see what they have to say at that point. But if I am up 50% by the time we get to earnings, and a little bit more so, let's say I'm up 50% plus by the time earnings are over with in January, at that point I think I'd probably sell my position. Now, if I was down on my position for whatever reason, let's say it did break past 190 and even, shot below my average cost of 160 or got around there, like I said, I would definitely be interested in buying more because I do believe in Boeing long term. I think that they're recovering for what could be a good position for them in the long term, and I still have faith in the company overall. But that just about wraps it up for our video on Boeing today, guys. The 737 MAX is finally here, and now we just got to be careful, stay vigilant, and stay on top of everything that Boeing puts out as we Boeing investors, hope to see higher days for that stock down the road. I hope you guys appreciated this video. I hope you guys got a lot of value out of it. I know that some of you are Boeing investors and like to keep up with these videos that I put out. So if you guys did get any value out of the video, I would appreciate, again, if you guys could do me the huge favors of hitting the like and subscribe buttons, because that's what helps me grow the channel, and that's what motivates me to keep me going. I'll try to put out another video in the next couple of days because there's just so much news that I wanted to cover with you guys. We have to go over Sonos's earnings report because that was a killer. So be on the lookout for that video in the next couple of days, guys. Until then, thanks to all of you for tuning in. This is Life with Dan.